Hi, everybody. So it's really funny because I didn't really think about how I was going to actually do this order of operations. But I am introducing the panel of myself. But this is the last programming session of the day. I am going to talk all about my time with Measure of Music in the last 5 years. I'm going to be interviewed by a dear friend of mine, Jeremiah Gogo, who has been involved with Measure of Music since its inception. In fact, he is the one that hired Michele, who you heard from on Friday. So it's a very full circle moment. And so, with that, Jeremiah, welcome back to Measure of Music.
Thank you so much for the very kind words, Christine. Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone's enjoyed the weekend and got a lot out of it, as we usually do, as is every year. I'm very blessed and fortunate to be able to interview, I guess, have a chat with my dear friend, Christine, who I'd like to do a little bit of backstory, if I may, before we get started. And I haven't told Christine I'll do this, so hopefully she's not too surprised. But we met whilst I was at Universal Music Group. And I guess my career is one that has spanned a couple of the majors, a couple of roles, and I've kind of thrown myself into data from the A&R marketing commercial perspective. However, at this time in my career, I was still young. I was in Sweden, and in a UMG Sweden office, there was someone who was kind enough to take some time to show me around the office, show me what Universal Sweden was like. And ever since then, I am indebted to our friendship and all of the great things she's done, not just for me, but for the industry as a whole in promoting positive change. So first of all, I'd like to say thank you to Christine. And after that quick intro, let's get started. So Christine, I'd love for you to take it right back to the beginning, talk about yourself and career. Why music industry? Why data? Why this fascination around the intersect between tech, data, and music?
Well, first of all, thank you for such a kind intro. Thank you. Honestly, I really was just warning him about the food in Sweden. Everything else, who would have known we'd be here right now? But as a fellow Nigerian, I was like, yeah, let me prepare you before you arrive as to what you're going to get. And now look at us. Yeah, so to answer your question, I guess why music, why data? These are all great questions. I've loved music as long as I can remember loving music. I don't remember a time in my life. I think I was 5 years old and I loved music. I've always loved it. And so that was kind of always a given. But it wasn't until I was like, I don't know, probably like 11 or 12 when I realized the music industry was a thing, basically. And what I mean by that is I remember watching the MTV Music Awards, and the artists would go up on stage and they would collect their award, and they'd be like, I want to thank my mom, I want to thank God. And they started naming people. I was like, cool. So let's talk about who those other people are. So this was like, I think Google was barely a thing. So like I'm dating myself here. But I remember thinking, okay, these people do something so good that an artist has won an award and they say their name on stage. What do I need to do that? That is basically all I knew about the music industry. Was like people existed that were not the artists. To sum it up, basically. 2 years later, I found myself figuring out a way to work with artists. Basically, I met a local band from Baltimore, where I'm from. Shout out to the DMV. And they were like, "Hey, check out my music. It sounds a lot like Simple Plan, which is a band I had just walked out from seeing." And I was like, "Cool." Listen to them. I was like, "Love this." Fast forward, I was running their street team at 14 years old, and that's how I got my start in the music industry. And then the data bit came a bit later. Again, dating myself, this was the MySpace era. And so I remember digital marketing in the music industry really, in my opinion, started with the MySpace era. And no one, I don't think we were even calling it digital marketing yet because there was only one kind of marketing. And so I had gone from street marketing, as I was managing our street team, to digital marketing and just kind of combining them. So I was like, cool, I'm going to tell people about their show or their music on the internet, which was novel at the time, as well as in person with flyers and stickers and things like that, basically. And so that was like step one of the process. And then eventually people started tracking the digital marketing. Like people were like, cool, if you send people to a website, you can know how many people viewed it. And I'm like, that's crazy. I'm like, what do you mean? And so I just heard the word analytics for the first time ever when I was looking at Google Analytics, which is a website tracking tool basically, and I realized then that I was fascinated by data and how to optimize my marketing campaigns using data. I was working for rock bands, and that's how it all kind of pieced itself together, I guess.
Amazing, amazing. And at that point, I guess I was coming into music just after you had started. Little bit of background, my degree was maths. I did a master's in financial economics, but didn't quite know where I wanted to go. And I give you this information because something like measure of music didn't exist for me when I was getting into the music industry. There wasn't any kind of playbook on how to use your kind of love for data alongside your love for the music industry to get into this world. And so it leads me on to my next question: in why measure of music? What inspired you to start this event? What was that first thought?
Yeah, so I also have a STEM degree. Yesterday I made a comment about the ethnic kid to STEM degree pipeline. It still persists here. And yeah, I didn't have a roadmap either, obviously. There was no like set kind of thing to do. I One of the things about the music industry I always say is the best and worst thing about the music industry is anybody can work in the music industry. There is no path. If you wanted to be a lawyer, you do this, this, and this, and you're a lawyer. It's really clear. It's really straightforward. If you want to be a doctor, you do this, this, and this, and you're a doctor. I'm not saying either are easy because like I could never. I'm just saying there's like a clear like here are all the steps you do to do the thing. I always joke that the only people that think they work in, that like actually think they work in the music industry are A&Rs. I don't think anyone else is like certain they work in the music industry. Like it's like vaguely like I think I do. Like A&Rs like in the studio doing the thing. Like I'm like, do I work in music sometimes? And so when it came to like creating measure of music, I was like, how do I help a lot of people that want to get into the music industry, that want to shift around the music industry, that want to understand the music industry, that are interested in music and tech and the intersection of it? How do I help as many of these people as possible? We were deep in COVID when I started building this. It was like September 2020. I don't think we had our booster shots yet. Like deep, deep in COVID, you know. And everyone was losing their job, and I was like, how can I help people? So I started doing these like one-on-one calls with people every Monday night. My calendar was filled up real quick, guys. And so I was like, how do I scale this to something? Because I come from a startup background as well. So scalability is a thing. So I was like, how do I scale this? And somehow in my head, instead of thinking maybe I just add a second night, I decided to start a conference, which took way more time than just adding like a second phone call night. But here we are. And so I was like, I would have called people and they're like, cool, how do I learn to code? And I was like, well, I use the Spotify API. And they're like, cool, like what platform do you use? I'm like, oh, Chartmetric. And they're like, oh, like, how do I intersect music and data? I'm like, these ways. And like, what's it like to be a woman in the industry? What's it like to be a person of color in the industry? What's it like to be an immigrant? Et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, cool, I'm answering a lot of the same questions constantly. So instead of me talking about the Spotify API, I'll just bring Spotify. And instead of me talking about Chartmetric, I'll just bring Chartmetric. And part of the reason why I created this 5 years ago is so I didn't have to talk so much. Yet here we are.
Sounds so simple. Sounds so simple. And what an amazing thing you've managed to put together. I'm sure it wasn't easy at all. I'm sure you've had a bunch of challenges, ups and downs, highs and lows. And so as we move the conversation along, I'd love for you to talk or touch on some of those highs and lows. What are some of the kind of big challenges you've had over the years in getting Measure of Music to the global event that it is today?
Oh gosh, so year one, it was pieced together with like duct tape and string. I did not have a plan. I literally was like, cool, I'm gonna get a couple of my friends to come talk about their like APIs and stuff. I thought like 50 people would be interested. Like truly, it didn't even occur to me that like just for context, we're about to hit 2,000 registrations for the year. And so like in my wildest dreams would I have thought 2,000 people would be interested, yet alone multiple years in a row. Because year one we hit 1,000 people, and then subsequent years we've done 2,000 ish or more people every year since then, right? Um, yeah, and so for me, really, what was the issue, or like how I like the lows was like year one, I didn't have any money. I didn't think about getting sponsors. It didn't even occur to me to get sponsors or anything like that. So year one, I pieced it together. I was like, cool, how do I make a portal? Thankfully, I can code. Because the whole MySpace thing, I learned to code, and I continue to learn to code. So I code in like 3 languages, which comes in handy a lot, actually. Um, and so I learned to code. I built out a lot of like the systems in place, basically. And then my wonderful husband, who's an engineer, also helped me figure it all out. And so that was year one. There was no money. I think I put it together an entire like how I did it series for year one. And I did the whole thing for like $200 or something like that. It was I somehow brought 1,000 people to a conference with like in Zoom for like $200. It was a whole thing.
Wow.
The following year, I was like, huh, perhaps maybe we could get sponsors. And so the first sponsor I ever got was technically Power Up. So Power Up is a organization focused on Black executives and Black artists within the UK music industry. And they provide workshops, mentoring, grants money for people that are working in the space that have new projects they're working on, things like that. And so I didn't really believe I could get sponsorship money for a virtual conference until Power Up said, here's £5,500 for your conference. And I'm like, cool. If they'll give me money, other people might give me money too. And so I recruited the help of my friends and my sponsorship team that still to this day, 4 years after the fact, from year two on, Jump Global. And I was like, hey, you guys, I have this conference. Can you help me? And they were nice enough to. And so in the first year I started raising money, I raised $25,000, including the Power Up money. And I was able to pay my speakers, which was my number one priority. And then everything else, I was like, oh, we'll sort that out, because my speakers have been majority, minority, and gender and race every single year, including this year. And it's really important to pay marginalized communities. So that was my first priority. So the low was figuring it all out, I suppose. The high has been like every year since has been pretty cool.
Amazing. And I mean, you spoke about some of those cool sponsors that you got along the way. Shout out to Jump Global for sure. You've also had some wonderful mentors and judges that have helped along the way. I've thrown my hat in whenever it's been needed. But I mean, talk to me about some of the industry relationships you made over the years, and how, and maybe some advice to some people that are starting in the industry, how you've managed to maintain those professional relationships, who then came in handy. And if you'd like to give a shout out to anyone in particular, those mentors, judges, sponsors, and friends that have helped you along the way. Talk about how you developed, maintained, and leveraged those professional relationships to help you out during the formation of Measure of Music.
Yeah, so I will, the caveat here, I have a rule about never saying with regards to a job that you were lucky. And so I'm going to say I feel incredibly lucky and incredibly blessed to be in the position I'm at, but not because of a job. Don't ever let an employer hear you say you're lucky, because they will underpay you. Key information. But I feel incredibly lucky because the network I have developed over the years is amazing. The frequency in which I send someone hey, can you help me with this? Or I need someone to step in for this. And people say yes immediately. I'm like, oh my God, like it's incredible, because like, what? That's amazing. Thank you. Like, just like, and like, I could shout out people. There's too many people to shout out. I have a constant roster of people where I'm like, yo, a speaker just dropped out. Hey, I need this. Hey, I need that. Are you available for this? And they just say yes. Like, there's no questions asked, and they say yes. And I'm like, that's awesome. Because I remember also fighting to get my way into the traditional music industry years ago. And I made it, I guess. So that's cool. And so like how I developed it, how I built it, I think the big key thing that gets lost to people is you have to give way more than you take. That's the number one thing. I have no real other piece of advice besides you have to give way more than you can take. Like, some of you might know that I post weekly-ish job postings on LinkedIn, with all of these different companies that are hiring in the industry. And I started that during COVID as well. And I thought eventually, people would still have jobs that I wouldn't have to do it anymore. But we are 5 years out, and here we are. Yeah. So, and yeah, like I said, I do my mentorship calls. I'm on several boards that are unpaid. I run this conference. I don't take a profit from this conference as well. Like, I try to give back as much as I can to the community. And so I feel like, and I have like a shout out for Measure of Music, but a different shout out is, I guess 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, somewhere around there, I lost my job. That was a thing. And so I got laid off. The company startup I was at imploded quite dramatically, actually. And so I got on the internet and I was like, yo, hey everyone, I suppose I need a new job is basically to sum up what the post said. And I was like, cool, this is the first time I actually got to like be public about needing a new job. Let's see how this goes. And 70 companies reached out, like
Wow.
70 companies
Wow.
reached out. Um, which was insane. 40 of them I was able to pass along to all of the other people that had got laid off as well because it was a mass layoff basically. So I like basically ended up being like a little mini recruitment agency and like sending people's CVs over to all these different companies and like collating and like wrapping them all up basically to get all of the other people jobs as well. And I spent that like I think I don't know 2 or 3 months talking with 30 companies about a job, and that's all. I don't know if I even sent an application in. Like, and every job I had gotten before that, I was on the application process. And that was the first time I was like, cool. Well, this network has come really in handy, I suppose.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the fact that you got 70 people email you about jobs is just testament to who you are. And going back to what you were saying about always make sure you're giving more than you receive in these relationships. I think what sums it up perfectly is that you got these 70 and then you apportion 40 to send out to a network for other people who may have been in need at a time when the industry was going through some turmoil. So I'd say that that's a great example of giving more than you get. And in that very moment, you showed exactly why it was that you got 70 jobs by giving 40 to other people that may also need to have conversations in the industry too. Having said that, you've had some incredible wins along the way with Measure of Music. This has helped to launch the careers of so many people that have participated. I think more importantly, it's also helped to catalyze some conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion in tech data and the wider music industry. I'd love for you to talk about some of those wins you've had in Measure of Music, but also more specifically how you think Measure of Music has impacted our industry from the perspective of diversity, inclusion, and kind of cultural acceptance as we move from people with data backgrounds into an industry that perhaps was slightly hesitant initially.
Oh, I mean, I am not so delulu to think that like I have single-handedly made an impact with regards to DEI in the music industry.
You most certainly have contributed. You most certainly have contributed.
But maybe a tiny little sliver. Like I don't know, like one of my favorite things is I often get messages from hiring managers that would say literally just like, hey, I saw someone was a Measure of Music hackathon participant, and so I gave them an interview. Like there was no question, there was no like additional steps. They were like, I saw on their CV that they actually got through the entire project, and because of that, I gave them an interview. And let me like, yo, that's incredible. Like, you know what I mean? Like, what do you mean? Like that this little conference I pieced together with Zoom and duct tape in 2021 is getting people job interviews at major labels and DSPs it's there's no way. Like there's no way you could have told me that that was the thing that was going to happen. So that's amazing. Like to be completely frank, that is the coolest thing in the world just to hear every single time. I'm thrilled when I hear it. And so like that's a big piece of it. And then also, I think that like I've helped at the very least set a standard for music conferences. Very few music conferences, especially in the US, pay their speakers. In addition to that, if you look at the lineups for music conferences, most of the time they are very white, they are very male, they're still very US focused. And I have gone out of my way to avoid doing all of those things on purpose. It was part of the reason why I started Measure of Music was to do all of those things on purpose. And so at the very least, even if people haven't changed, I know they feel bad because I will hear people say, yeah, I know that our speaker lineup isn't as I'm like, you could do better, but at least they feel bad now because they know it's possible. Because before they could say, oh, well, it's not really possible because this, and this. And I'm like, bet this isn't even my full-time job. Like I run this for 3 days once a year. This isn't even my full-time job. And I am able to have a majority minority speakers in terms of gender and race. If it's your whole job to program a conference and you can't find people of color and you can't find women and you can't find people with disabilities and you can't find trans people and you can't find these people to speak, that seems like a failing on your part, not a failing on the industry's part. And so I know that at the very least, it's a beacon, it's a signal that you can do better, we can do better. And even if I've just like a little online conference that happens every year, I just like, it's nice to know that like it's possible and people see that it's possible, and even if they're not doing anything about it, they know that they could be doing better. And I hope that at some point we'll get to the point of actually doing the thing instead of just saying they should do the thing, basically.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can attest to some of the people that I've come across via Measure of Music, some of which I've worked with. I mean, I had a career where I went from Universal to a company called Atlantic in Warner Music Group, and when I joined, I had to start building a data team. And as head of data for a label that was kind of entering this data world, I guess for the first time, from both a marketing and A&R data perspective, I had to find someone. And as Christine mentioned at the top of this keynote, Michele, who you guys may have heard of earlier on in the weekend, was someone who I guess ticks a lot of those boxes. But not only that, I had seen him, I'd mentored his team on a project at Measure of Music. And I think what's so important about that is not only can we kind of see this diverse group of people that complete these challenges, but also we can skip the interview phase. I've literally seen your work. And that story to me is really important because it showed a tangible example of, hey, this really works. He's really here, and now he's the A&R data lead at Atlantic a few years on. What an incredible achievement.
He's
And
like shouting for joy. I talk about Michele constantly.
big up Michele. And just to move the conversation on a little bit, I guess one of the things I had for you was, if you could go back now, knowing what you know, having experienced all you've experienced, and give yourself one piece of advice before you started Measure of Music, what might that be and why?
Oh gosh. If I could go back, my brain would be like, Christine, I need you to be for real. Because when I started Measure of Music, I was working at Warner, and I was working international at Warner. And so when you work international at a company, that means like sometimes you need to talk to Australia. The time you can talk to Australia is 7 a.m. Yeah, like sometimes you need to talk to LA. The time LA is like, oh, I'm available at 7 p.m. And so I was having days like that on a fairly regular basis. Yet somehow I thought it was a good idea to start an entire music conference. So like if I look back, I don't know if I would definitely done it if I had known. um, so it's really good that like hindsight is only like the one way, you know. But yeah, I mean, like a piece of advice, I don't know. I mean, like I think like I feel like I've like, this is gonna sound super conceited, but like, I feel like I did it all right, you know. Like I wish I had money year one. That would have been cool because I wish I could say I paid my speakers all 5 years, and I can't say that. But like other than that, like we did the thing. I did the thing I meant to do essentially. And even when you're talking about like when you hired Michele, you already knew a finished project. Like you had seen his work. That's why the hackathon exists, is because I want people to have portfolio pieces they can say, here's the thing I did. Not like, here's a theoretical thing I learned in uni. It's like, here's the thing I did. And not only did I do it, I did it in 48 hours. There's work that I have seen done in this conference that I have never seen done to that caliber in my own professional career by some of the people I work with. Like these people are these people are incredibly impressive, and a lot of them just want a chance. They just want a shot, and like at the very least, I hope that I've helped give a lot of them that chance and that shot. Because like that is why I've gone through all of this trouble, is because like I want to surround myself with people that don't suck in the music industry, because the music industry have a lot of people that suck. And if we can have less of those people, this is all really self-serving, so that like it just sucks a little less, basically. And I want to bring all of those people with me. And have them be part of the music industry. The future of the music industry looks a lot more like this conference than it does with a lot of the things that you've seen, basically.
And that's a perfect way to move on to the next part. Following talking about the past and some of kind of the advice you give for yourself, how about we go towards the future? As the industry changes, as we are seeing it's still changing, and breaking into this space remains just as challenging, if not more so actually, than some of the times when we were coming up. Talk to me a little bit about what part you feel Measure of Music could play in the future of the industry, and then perhaps some of your dreams or thoughts about what you'd like the future of Measure of Music to look like.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, like, yeah, I harp on and on about it, and obviously, as you guys have hopefully got by now, is like DEI is still real important over here. I don't care what anybody else be saying. Like I want to see more brown and black people leading this industry. I want to see more women leading this industry. I want to see more non-binary folks leading this industry. I want to see a world reflected that actually looks like the world in the music industry. That's all I'm requesting. We're called the global majority for a reason. Both gender minorities are actually the majority, as well as ethnic minorities. We're literally the majority. So there is no reason why we should not be represented in such a fashion within the music industry. I will always be pro diversity. Thank you, Matthew. I'm pro diversity always, but also like if you think about it, like when it comes down to it, the white men are actually in the minority. Like that's just how the numbers actually. If you look at global stats, that's actually how it works, right? And so like that's all I'm asking for, right? And then another part of it is part of the reason why this is Music Tech and Data Conference is because I see the barriers that people face that have an interest in STEM, that have an interest in technology within the music industry. If you look at all of the major companies on the recorded side and on the publishing side, up until very recently, not a single CEO had any kind of tech background in the publishing or the recorded side of the companies. Like you would look all around, everyone has an A&R background. Maybe if they're the black sheep, they might have a marketing background. But God forbid, the way in which the music industry makes all of its money through streaming and algorithms, there'd be people that were tech leaders running any of these companies. And so I found that I was hitting the glass ceiling as I was progressing in my career, because my background of being a person that is strong in tech and can code was actually a hindrance to my future in the music industry. So A, I was like, cool, don't need to stay here and have that fight. But also B, I'm like, how do I make this better still? And so when I pieced together Measure Music, the entire point, you guys watched all these talks all this weekend, was that we didn't sit all day long and just talk about algorithms, right? Everyone talked about how they're using data to do their jobs. And that is what's important here. That is why I started Measure Music, is because when people talk about music data, we're not just talking about how many Spotify streams you got. We're talking about so much more. And if we're able to embrace that and accept that, in addition to the creativity, in addition to the art, in addition to making the music, in addition to working with the artists, you're going to have a more well-rounded music industry. The music industry isn't just one part. It's not just A&R, right? And so for me, that's what I want the future of the music industry to look like, is to be for real, guys. Like that's how we make the money. You need to have leaders that understand how we make the money. And then to answer the question about the future of Measure Music, let me tell you, I come up with what we're gonna do. I'm like, I think we'll try this. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. I think I want to do more in-person locations. I think I want to do more maybe like standalone hackathons, because I know there's tons of interest there as well. I do a survey every year. I'm always looking for feedback. I incorporate a lot of the survey, like the survey answers, into how I run the conference every year. So I'm really open to it, because like there's stuff that I have ideas to do, things like that, but like this is for y'all. And so like if you have things you want to see, if you have things that you want us to do, like let me know, because like I'm happy to do it, obviously. But yeah, it's just like I just want to bring people together, right?
Yeah, and I think you've done an amazing job at doing so thus far. Okay, and I guess just as we begin to wrap up, I thought it might be nice perhaps for everyone watching, if there's a piece of advice, tangible advice for today that you can give to someone trying to break into the music industry. And what might that be? I'm sure the people that have participated over the course of the weekend have picked up a lot, but with your views on the industry and how you see it today, Christine, what's a piece of advice you'd give to a young person watching this that may want to break into the music industry today?
Yeah, I feel like this piece is always kind of like changing in my mind as I think about like what I would have said to my younger self, like how to progress your career and things like that. Like for myself, my answer is always like I should have made the move to a bigger market earlier. And as I'm getting older, I think about this a lot, and I'm actually immensely grateful for the experience I got to have when I was in Baltimore. Baltimore, for those that are not U.S. based, is basically a B market city outside of DC. It's an hour from DC, 90 minutes from Philadelphia, like 4 hours from New York City. It's a small market, and so when I was young, I was like, oh, I love the city, but not all of the bands that I want to see come here, not all the acts I want to see come here. There's no industry here. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I have to move to New York. I have to move to Nashville. I had all these thoughts, right? But the thing about living in Baltimore is that, let me tell you, I always got all the interviews. I ran a magazine when I was 16 to 21. And let me tell you, there's not a lot of music press in Baltimore. So I always got all the interviews. If I lived in New York City, let me tell you, I would have never gotten the interviews. I would have never gotten the access or the exposure. So yes, it was less people came, but when they came, I got to be in the rooms where it happened constantly. And so I would say to all the young people or even the older people that want to get in music, want to shift around in music, it's figure out what you can do where you are. And even if you are in a big market like in New York or in LA or things like that, is figure out what your niche is in those spaces. You can be a big fish in a small pond. And if you're a big fish in a small pond, you get a lot of opportunities. And I think when I was younger, I kind of almost took that for granted, not realizing like, hey, Christine, the reason why you got to hang out with this band or interview this or get this opportunity is because you happen to live in a market that was a small market. And so my advice is like, embrace that. I worked at the radio station. I worked all the venues. I worked every single place one could work in music in Baltimore. I worked at all of them, and I knew everybody because of it. And so embrace where you live. Don't feel like you have to move to a major market. Part of the reason why Measure of Music is always going to be virtual, at least a part of it's always going to be virtual, is because I want everyone to be able to access Measure of Music, and I also want you to take all this information that you have and give it back to the people that live in your markets, because all the conferences are geared towards the U.S. and the U.K., and we have the handful of conferences here or there, but if you're not in a major market, you're only going to get the access to the music industry maybe once a year when your big conference comes to town. And so the idea is to be able to disseminate this information and this access and this networking to everybody.
And on that wonderful note, Christine, I just wanted to say, you launched Measure of Music 5 years ago, and now it's a global event that's brought together thousands of people from over 95 different countries.
Mm-hmm.
And from a friend to a friend, I have to say I'm really incredibly proud of you. I look up to you always, and you know this. This is someone who I will always come to seek advice. And as much as my career has had some great moments too, whenever I have needed a chat, I know that advice that Christine gives is completely invaluable. So for everyone listening that's had a chance to have a little pen and paper and write down some of the gems that Christine is dropping, I think we should all really appreciate that. So I just wanted to give you the final word to throw out anything before we wrap up. I'm not sure if we've got time for some.
We have some time, actually. We have a few minutes for some questions. So I will let you guys ask away. If you haven't gotten sick of hearing me talk at this point. What are you going to do next, Eileen? I feel like the answer is like, I'm going to Disney World, but I actually just came back from Disney World, so we're good. I had this 15-year plan since I was probably about 15 years old, and I kind of did it. And then I was like, cool, I'm going to quit my job and just kind of see what happens. And so I've been consulting full time now for, I don't know, 7 months. And the work just keeps coming, which is great. And so probably as long as the work keeps coming, I'm probably going to keep doing that, which is cool. And if it doesn't stop, if it stops coming eventually, hopefully someone is nice enough to give me a new full-time job, I guess. We'll see. I've been really type A my whole life, and I'm trying to unlearn that. And it's a learning curve to get to that point, basically.
I've seen a question from Catalin around advice for keeping motivated.
Oh no. Oh gosh, okay, there's so much shit happening here. Okay. So one thing I always say, when it comes to just like, let's start with the question of like keeping the motivation, is like, I always say I'm not the right person to ever ask about work-life balance. I am real bad at that. So like I will get that out of the way right now. That is just not who I am as a person. But I will caveat. Normally, my issue with work-life balance is that I'm doing the stuff I wanted to do on top of the full-time job. Like, don't be giving people extra money, like, or your extra time. Like, do your own stuff on the side. If you end up a little burned out because of that, that's way better than giving some like a white dude that owns a company that you have no stake in more of your free time. I promise you. But with regards to like the way the industry is structured, like, and processes go sideways, and like you have to like you have to compartmentalize a bit. You have to get to the point where you think about what your impact is and what you can do. I recognized long ago that like I'm not going to be able to change, the major labels or the DSPs, whatever it might be. And so I pivoted. I always say, this is going to sound real bad because I have a bunch of sponsors, but I have an inherent distrust in companies, but not in people. And what I mean by that is I believe in people, and their willingness and their want to do the right thing, basically. Companies are going to look out for their bottom line, they're going to look out for their shareholders. That is what they are supposed to do, which I recognize, right? And so you have to think about what impact you're trying to make. And so I've been working directly with artists for the last few months now, which has been amazing for me. And it's going full circle back to where I wanted to be in the first place. Always say I went this really roundabout way, just work with artists anyway, which is all I ever wanted to do. And so when you're thinking about like these processes and the admin or whatever it might be, like it might be starting your own thing. If you recognize that there's a better way to do something, just do it. I recognized there was a better way to do a conference, and so I just did it. And so if you have that wherewithal in you, if you feel like you know best, go ahead and do the thing. And I don't think it has to be like a big venture back, blah blah blah. Just do the thing. It could be like I have a different way to make a spreadsheet than how everyone's been doing the process, whatever it might be. Start there and see how it goes. And that'll be your motivation, is because the impact you're making, even if it's just one person, is probably better than the work you're doing at any full-time job normally.
Absolutely. And I'd love to jump in on that very quickly in saying that just do it. You doing is better than doing nothing. I founded an internship program called the Open Desk program when I was at Warner's, and that was purely just no one wants to give young people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds internships, because the only interns we saw in the office were those that were the kids of, nephews of, sons of the people that were in charge. And following that program, we've been super successful. It's now award-winning. We've had 14 people from various different levels of socioeconomic background. But that's kind of, I was the living example of Christine's advice there, where I just went and did it. Start with one person, get one intern, and then keep it going. And it's the same there. So
one of my favorite sayings that people are saying on Twitter right now is like, that's an excellent use of free will. And I love that as a concept of saying, as a saying. I'm like, that sums it up, right? Like, you can just do whatever you want. And like, it's both freeing and daunting to hear that, but I tell people this constantly. There is no Hi, Michele. So there's no set roadmap, there's no set guideline, which is daunting, but like you can just do whatever you want. Like who's gonna stop you? And that's kind of like the ethos I bring to everything. That and another one that, again, not great. So like all the things I say, like, your mileage may vary how it goes, but one of my favorite sayings is also like, may the bridges I burn light my way. And I think about this constantly, because sometimes like as Megan said, don't save him. He don't want to be saved. Like, sometimes you can just let those people go. And so oftentimes I'm like, if this person is not serving me, if this person is negative, if they're not doing the thing, just let it go. And so the combination of those two things is kind of how I live my life. And thankfully it's worked out, because if it didn't, obviously I burned a lot of bridges.
And just as we've got 1 minute left, let's end things on a slightly lighter note. Someone, DJ Yeps, asks, what music do you enjoy?
Oh boy!
What are you listening to right now, Christine? What's fun?
Oh my god! So your girl went to the Grammys for the first time ever last month. It's been 20 years, but hey, look, I made it. So that was amazing. I love pop music, and when I say pop music, I mean the overarching concept of pop music, rather than like just like Ariana Grande. Bring me the most commercially viable pop track you've got, and I'm here for it. It doesn't need to be a popular song, but let me tell you how much I love Burna Boy and like Paramore. Like I love pop music. Which I mean, like of all the shit I talk sometimes, working at a major label is really handy if you love pop music, basically. And so I love Doechii. I love Taylor Swift. I love Sabrina Carpenter. I grew up as a little Love Tour kid, so my background is like I got my first start with pop punk bands. So Fall Out Boy has been my favorite band since I was like 15 years old. I love it all. Bring me pop music. Bring me pop music. While I'm saying this is a good time to shout out some Black girls that are doing fantastic pop music. So Rachel Chinariri here in the UK is excellent. Just wonderful pop music. There's a band called Meet Me at the Altar, which is a pop punk band that are like all queer women of color. So cool. I'm obsessed with Shabuzi. I've been like love Shabuzi.
Yes.
I've taken on the attitude of Glorilla, which is one of my favorite TikToks. If someone says Glorilla, it makes me feel like I can fight and I can't. And that's the energy that I'm bringing to things that I also cannot fight. I could go on and on, but I love pop music, guys. That's my favorite thing in the world. Yes.
Amazing. And on that beautiful note, thank you so much, Christine. We love and appreciate you. Keep inspiring, keep motivating us to do better, and hopefully we create the industry that we'd love to see in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. This was amazing. Thank you so much, Jay. This was so fun. Thanks for the comments. Thanks for the likes. Thanks to all the familiar faces I'm seeing in the comments, or I guess familiar names. This was great. That was fun. Thanks. See you, Jay.
Thanks.
All right, everyone. Hopefully you had fun listening to me ramble on for a while. I had fun doing it, so that's quite good. So we are going into our project presentations now. So in the next session, if you're a spectator, you'll see a link to watch the presentations on YouTube Live, actually. So you'll be leaving this platform over to YouTube Live. Our participants won't be able to see your comments till later. So when they watch back, they'll be able to see your comments. So please do comment. But you're welcome to comment and chat amongst yourselves while you watch their presentations. If you're a judge or a hackathon participant, you'll be provided links in Zoom to present and judge. Everyone else, you'll be headed over to YouTube to hear me talk a bit more before thankfully other people will talk again. So with that, thank you all so much. I really appreciate you all. You guys are real sweet. See you over at the project presentations.